So Yom Kippur, that's the next 10 days. 10 days later comes the Day of Atonement. 10 days later. The high priest, he had some jobs. On this day, he wore white linen. He didn't have the rest of his outfit. He only wore the white linen. And the high priest washed in the laver before he butchered some animals, basically. He did some offerings. The offerings for himself, he did a sin and a burnt offering. The sin was a bull. The burnt offering was a ram. The offerings for the people, he did a sin and a burnt offering, but the sin for the people was 2 goats. And I'm going to focus on that a lot today because that's really what this day is all about. The sin offering for the people, 2 goats, was a scapegoat or Azazel. Yom Kippur is, I'm going to share about Yom Kippur from a national perspective instead of the individual like I've been saying. And that's where I'm going to go with this. So we're going to spend some time here. This is a tabernacle layout. The high priest, sin offering and burnt offering, he did those 2. And then for the people, he did the sin offering and burnt offering. 2 sin offerings, 2 burnt offerings. That's what he did for this day. I want to focus on the scapegoat offering today. It's the only day where the high priest goes into the holy place, but then a step further, he goes into the holy place to sprinkle blood, and he's going to open the veil once a year and burn incense behind the veil. And that's what he's going to do this day. Then he's actually going to go into the Holy of Holies on this day, and he's going to sprinkle blood on the mercy seat. Very special day, and it all relates to these 2 goats. And from a national perspective, we're going to see something a little different. But to understand this, we must first understand the tabernacle and what it was really for. Now, the tabernacle, you guys have heard this, okay? It's a hospital. I've shared this with you a million times before. I'm going to share it again, but they brought the sick to Aaron the priest. It's also food regulation. The peace offering was regulation for meat, and the meal offering was regulation for your crops. That's what they're doing, is preparing food for the nation. It was also a bank after the shekels of the sanctuary. Over and over again, the Bible talks about the shekels of the sanctuary. But what today's about is that it was a judicial system. That's what today's about. It's not about those other things. It's about the fact that it's a judicial system. Okay, we know that because Aaron, anytime he went into the holy place, he had to wear the breastplate of judgment. Judgment, mishpat. It means pronounced judicially, a verdict. He's going in there with his breastplate of judgment because he's giving a verdict. This is a sentence at trial. Sin means the transgression of the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. I don't need to sell you on that. We're all familiar with that. We should just translate it crime today, so we understand the Bible better. And that's kind of our fault, but that's what that word means. The Day of Atonement cleansed the courtroom of crime or criminal records for the year. They're getting rid of something. Really getting rid of something. It's not some spiritual lesson that they had no idea what it was. They're getting rid of the criminal records. And I'm not trying to say there's not a symbolism. There is that. But I think the symbolism will become more clear when we understand that reality of what they did. If we don't understand that reality, the symbolism and the real important part of the lesson isn't there. There's a lot of other things that people teach on that are true, but I've never heard someone teach that it's removing criminal records for the year, because that's very significant. The sin offering was the penalty for breaking God's law. So I'm going to go over the sin offering real quick, then we're going to talk about the scapegoats. All year the people would bring the sin offering to the tabernacle. All year. Bring it to the door of the tabernacle. If I'm convicted of a crime, not sin, I did something bad. If you're a good guy, did you do this often? How many times you guys go to court and get convicted of a crime? Not that often, right? We wouldn't be doing this very often if we're living a righteous life and following the laws of our nation. But that's what they were doing. They would be found guilty, they'd bring their fine, or a fine with punitive damages, and they'd bring it to the tabernacle. All year that would happen. The priest would then dip his fingers in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the veil. So there's this veil, and he'd sprinkle it just before it. So all year, blood's piling up at that veil. The priest would then put some of the blood at the horns of the altar of incense. So you put it at the horns of the altar of incense. I'm going to redefine a lot of these things in just a minute. And then the priest would put the rest of the blood at the base of the brazen altar. I think that's just because it's a toxic substance. He's just getting rid of it. There's a big base in there to get rid of stuff. So the sprinkling of blood before the veil, that's where it went, right before the veil. The sin throughout the year would build up before this veil. Think about all year. Sin offering, blood, for an entire year. How often do our courts convict people?
Every day.
Daily, multiple times a day. This is like a continual thing for a nation. Now granted, ancient Israel is not nearly as big as America is, so it wouldn't have been as much, but it would be a pretty significant amount. The horns on the altar of incense. I'm going to redefine this real quick. I don't think you'll object to it too much. But blood on the horn signifies that your prayers were not answered. Let my prayers be set forth before thee as incense. You guys, this is nothing new, I'm sure, to you guys. The incense represents our prayers. Prayers in modern law are called pleadings. Prayers, if you go to Bovier's Law Dictionary, that's where I got this. You go to the pleading section, you'll see a whole lot of writing about prayer. Because it's an ancient legal term. It's not a religious term. So prayer, why is prayer? If you search in an ancient legal dictionary the term prayer or pray, and you're talking hundreds of times throughout it, everywhere. Because praying is what you did when you went to court. You'll see that in just a minute. Some definitions, pleadings. The formal entry of the defense on record, that's what Bovier's Law Dictionary says, 6th edition. Prayer is the Hebrew word tefillah, intercession. Isn't that what a lawyer does? They intercede for you. Supplication. Oh, yeah, you're pleading. You're asking for something. Pray, palal. That's the other word for prayer in the Bible. Hebrew, look at those words. To judge, to intercede, entreat, judgment, make supplication. Don't these sound like legal words, not religious words? See, what happened in the Bible, there's this legal thing going on called pleading. It was the word prayer. Now, the Bible also used it for talking to God, and they're symbolizing. It's not the literal meaning of it. We do the same stuff today. In fact, that's what Bovier was just writing about. We use that term to this very day. Prayer has always meant pleadings. Plea, and this is Bovier's Law Dictionary. This is what I mean. If you go to a digital version and you type the word pray, it'll come up everywhere. This is a definition for plea. Plea and bar is one which shows some ground for barring or defeating the action, and makes prayer to that effect. Makes a supplication. Makes an intercession. You're asking for something. That's what plea is, or pleading is, and that's what prayer means in the Bible. That's what this altar of incense is. This blood was brought before Yehovah again on the Day of Atonement. So after it piles up all year, we're going to do it one more time. And something very significant is going to happen on this day. But it was a literal thing that happened. It wasn't something that was just spiritual. It really happened in ancient societies. And I say societies because Israel wasn't the only one that did this. So this whole thing cleansed the tabernacle. He shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, because of their transgressions and all their sins. And so shall he do for the tabernacle of the congregation that remains among them in the midst of their uncleanness. So some more definitions. Atonement means to cover, purge, make atonement. Uncleanness is unclean, filthiness, and it's because of their sins, their crimes, their criminal records. They need to clean the criminal records, is what they're doing. The tabernacle is a courtroom. Remember the breastplate? You couldn't go into the tabernacle without that breastplate on because he's doing a judgment. This is a picture of God's courtroom in heaven. We should have one in here to match his. Ours are kind of close. You can see a resemblance of it. It's just not exactly right. Sin means the transgression of the law. I already went over that. And crime, that's the word we should use. And I said this before, the Day of Atonement cleansed the courtroom of crime or criminal records every year. Let's see how that does it. So the blood of the sin offerings went to the altar of incense. I just went over this stuff. Incense represents our prayers, full of incense, prayers of the saints. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense. Over and over again, you'll see in our law dictionaries, I know I'm hammering this kind of hard to make sure that everybody understands that I think the word prayer means plea. Prayers are pleas in court. The holy place was a courtroom. This is our holy place today. In fact, the veil turned into this bar right here. Do you see that? Go to a courtroom while the judge is there and sit on it. See what he does. He's going to toss you out like you wouldn't believe, with anger. Because that's the veil. You don't pass that veil unless you're invited in. Think about some of the terms the Bible uses, right? Come nigh unto the Lord. Some translations say approaching the Lord. Don't you have to ask to approach the bench? Right? It's the same word. If you want to approach the bench, you don't just walk up there. You seek permission to. The altar of incense. It used to be the bench. It's where the pleas were entered. It's where our prayers or pleas are entered. We call this a bench today in our courtrooms. See, we're kind of doing it. We're just not quite right. When Yeshua comes back, when Jesus comes back, we're going to do it right. That's the whole point. Trying to give a picture of what this kingdom is going to be like. We're going to do this right. The sprinkling of blood, your prayers or pleas were not answered. Well, think about this. You were found guilty. In other words, you lost your trial. The Bible says you have to have a trial first. Would you owe a sin offering if you won? No. It says clearly in Leviticus 4, and are guilty. And are guilty. I think 3 times in Leviticus 4, 2 times in Leviticus 5, you must be guilty. If you're guilty, then you owe. So if you're going to this altar and you're sprinkling blood on there, you lost your trial, you were found guilty, you need to repent. Kind of makes sense? The Ark of the Covenant. These pleas are appeals to the highest court in the land. That's where God sits. He is the highest court in the land. The daughters of Zelophehad, they had a controversy. Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, and they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the princes and all the congregation by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, and he was not in the company of them that gathered themselves together against Jehovah in the company of Korah, but died in his own sin and had no son. So these daughters don't have a brother. Then they said, Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family? Because he has no son. Give unto us, therefore, a possession among the brethren of our father. And Moses brought their cause before Jehovah. Cause, mishpat, judgment, verdict. He's going to go get a sentence. When's the only day he can do this? Atonement. The only day you're allowed to go before God is on the Day of Atonement. So think about the judicial system tearing all the way up. All these judgments that they may not have found. Because this didn't just cleanse the people. It cleansed the rulers. And it cleansed the judges. All their mistakes. The stuff they couldn't figure out. And here's God going to make the judgment for them.
Steve?
Yes.
But on a daily basis, it didn't have to go all the way up to God. The high priest, because of his breastplate, he could make judgment. He wouldn't have to go before.
Yes,
it just referred to God's law.
It's like our Supreme Court today. They don't hear every case.
Yeah.
They hear the ones that make it all the way up to them. So not everyone, only the ones that the small matters. That's what Moses said, right? All the small matters you will judge. All the great matters you bring to me. Well, what if Moses couldn't figure it out?
Right.
Day of Atonement. That's how this system would work. You'd go to the Day of Atonement. The Ark of the Covenant is where the high priest communicated with God to appeal to the highest judge in the universe. On the Day of Atonement, judgments that were undecided by man were decided by God just before the record of sins were removed. So there was a wiping of the slate every year. This is the stuff we don't picture because we're so focused on the symbolism instead of recognizing what's actually happening. The 2 goats of the sin offering. Jehovah's lot was sacrificed. So the one that got God's lot, the Lord's lot, is what most translations say, it was sacrificed. But the scapegoat was the removal of criminal records. Azazel, the word means the entire removal. Departure, that's what it means. Alfred Edersheim, he's one of the premier experts on the temple. He wrote a book called The Temple, Its Ministry and Services. The word Azazel, which only occurs in Leviticus 16, is by universal consent derived from a root which means wholly to put aside or wholly to go away. It means removal, get rid of, gone. That's what that word means. We paint these weird pictures like it's a name or something. It's just a word. And Alfred Edersheim says it's universal consent from the ancient world. Now, in modern times, we've come up with different terms for it, and I don't think they're true. I want to go with the older guys. They make more sense. This scholar said the Hebrew Azazel, however, is not a proper name, but a rare Hebrew noun meaning dismissal or entire removal. It is the ancient technical term for the entire removal of sin and guilt of the community that was symbolized by the sending away of the goat into the wilderness. So it means removal. All criminal records were expunged on this day. Israel was not the only ancient society that did this. This scholar said a new reading of the scapegoat ceremony is possible. In scapegoat rites in other places, then she goes on to talk about Greece. There's a lot of other nations that did this. Of course, some of them did it not right. They roughly treated or killed the goat. You know, a lot of speculation happens with ancient Israel doing that. Ancient Israel never did that, but some of the other societies did, and that's where the confusion comes into this. The analogy between these stories and the two goats on the Day of Atonement is obscured by the Hellenistic focus on guilt carried by the goat. But if we accept the teaching that guilt transferred is guilt expunged, that's what's happening. They're expunging criminal records. And my first objection I always get to this is, every year, everyone's slate's wiped clean? What about all the murderers and the rapists and all these horrible people? Well, I'm advocating for the entirety of God's law. Those people would have been executed right when they left God's altar. Because that's what the Bible says, and they would never make it to the Day of Atonement. So this is not encouraging what we might be doing today by letting hardened criminals out. What this is doing is showing an amazing amount of grace in the Old Testament and mercy. What are the weightier matters of the law? Justice, grace, faith. Well, you have to have a balance between judgment and grace. And what God's giving us is that perfect balance. Perfect balance. And every teacher knows this. If you have a good discipline plan and it's balanced, you'll have a great class every year. Every year, if you have a good discipline, and that's what God's teaching us. If our judicial system has a good balance of grace and justice, in other words, a hard penalty when it's deserved, but at the same time, those people, I learned this when I taught this at Rock Valley in 2017. There was an older gentleman, I can't remember his name, a friend of a friend of a friend, showed up 2 or 3 times. He came here on this day. And he came, and I could hear him as I was teaching this, and he was just getting visibly and audibly moved by it. And I just didn't understand it. He was all just, wow. Just kept saying stuff like, and he came to me afterwards. You wouldn't see it, but you can hear him talking on the video on my YouTube channel. But he came to me afterwards and said, did they really do that? And I just said, yeah, that's my opinion, and scholars seem to support it. He goes, man, because he was a veteran, I don't know which war, but suffered from severe PTSD, and he assaulted a police officer once. Didn't hurt the guy. He's now a felon. And what he said to me is, I just wish I could die at peace with the nation I've loved so much. And it was like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm almost crying just thinking about it right now. It's like he was teary-eyed, just wanted to be at peace with his nation because he fought so hard to make sure there's freedom here. And our nation would not forgive him for a silly little thing. And I don't know if he's still alive. You probably remember who he was. But it was that time where I recognized how big this is. How big it is to a nation to know that your nation will offer forgiveness when it's time. We really don't do that. We keep a criminal record forever. You never get rid of it. You can get it expunged if you try. But you can't, it's just not going to happen every year like this. When we think about ancient societies, if you look at the Mesopotamian temples, the evidence we have is they stored them on clay tablets. How much space are you going to need eventually? I mean, we had file cabinets prior to digital. And file cabinets would get kind of tedious, but clay tablet, you're just not going to have the space eventually. So the system's kind of necessary, but there's a reason beyond that. God knows we need both justice and mercy. Justice at the right time and mercy at the right time. It's His character, it's who He is. So the scapegoat was presented alive to make atonement with Him. Question, with who? It says to make atonement with Him. Answer, the other goat. This is one offering. 2 goats, one offering. The 2 goats are the same offering. 2 kids of the goats for a sin offering. It's singular. And almost every ancient writer will say this. Alfred Edersheim said the same thing. The 2 goats, however, must be altogether alike in look, size, and value. Indeed, so earnestly was it sought to carry out the idea that these 2 formed parts of one and the same sacrifice, that it was arranged they should, if possible, even be purchased at the same time. Okay, they're the same goat. I don't know why there's a debate today. Some people debate, oh, this one represents Satan, this one represents the Messiah, like they're different. They both represent our Messiah. They both represent Him. So they're the same sacrifice. This was to cleanse the government. What is this? Priests represent the judicial system. Rulers represent the government. This is a cleansing offering. Remember Leviticus 14 and the 2 birds? That's what it is. It's a cleansing offering. He always used 2 animals. Uses a living bird and a dead bird. Leviticus 14, the living bird and the bird that was killed. The dead bird is obviously the sacrifice. They died. The living bird is sent away. This is the same picture, but for commoners. Because look at the sacrificial system. This is why the sacrificial system is so important. Birds are for commoners. But a male goat is for rulers. I wonder if that's why we use goats for the Day of Atonement. It's cleansing the government. And all the criminal records, not only of the poor judgments made, but all the people, and wiping it clean and starting afresh every year. This is a cleansing offering. It's very important to remember that's what it is. Make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness, because of their transgressions. We're removing sins. It's cleaning out the tabernacle. This cleansed the tabernacle or courtroom. This is where the rulers made judgments. So all the bad judgments, God solved. Now, I don't know. There are some nations that have actually done this in the New Testament. And it's very unique. But I often wonder when Hebrews says we can come boldly to the throne of grace, and he's talking about the Holy of Holies. What if we had a courtroom that actually did that on the Day of Atonement? Went boldly. You don't need a holy place anymore. You just need to go to Yeshua, the Father, on this day and say, we couldn't figure out these judgments. Would you help us? I'll bet you He would. I will bet you He would if we did it His way, the way He commanded, and our judges did that. Now, if you study our history, our judges used to pray a lot. Our Congress used to pray a lot before opening, closing. We used to pray a lot. We may not have had the exact day right, but I think God really honored us as a result. And not only so, but we also joy in the Lord through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom we have now received the atonement. So our Messiah is this picture. This is the first coming and the second. The first coming was personal. The second coming is going to be national. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and Yehovah has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Isn't that what they laid on the scapegoat? All the sins and sent them away? As far as the east is from the west, so far has He removed our transgressions from us. This is what the Messiah is going to do in the future. The removal of sin. He took care of our sin problem at Passover in His first coming. But we still have sin. He's going to remove it just before He sets up His kingdom. And guess what? There's going to be sin, but it's going to be dealt with throughout His kingdom.